We all know how to communicate. As far as how effective the communication is, that is another thing. Think about it, okay? So we've been communicating naturally since the day we were born. A human's first communication is a cry. When a baby cries, we know that it's needing attention. I say we know, but it's more like a baby cannot say what they want, so we, as adults, have to decide what the baby's needs are. After all, the most basic purpose of human communication is to fulfill a need or to satisfy a need. As we grow up, we learn language, which makes communication far easier. We can express our needs more clearly and more precisely. The problem is that there are a lot of variables that go into communicating effectively. I'm talking about things like, is the message formal or informal? Is the message being sent or received by an individual, by a small group, or by a number of people? At what time of day or night is the message being transmitted? Where are the participants? For instance, are they on the table, in the same room, in the same building, in a different company, in a different country? How well do we know the person or people with whom we are communicating? Is this the first time that we have communicated with this person or these people? What is their status relative to us? Are they our superior, subordinates? Are they our equal? All these will or definitely do affect communication. That is the reason why we kind of look at communication barriers, okay? How then do we ensure effectiveness in communication? This is where principles of communication come in. When we talk about principles of communication, we're talking about aspects that have been taken into account to ensure that the communication flows smoothly and is to a degree effective, whether you are writing or you're actually just talking. Although these principles tend to work even better when you're writing. Now, the principles of communication will include things like, or actually are, number 1, clarity, number 2, completeness, conciseness, consideration, courtesy, and correctness. Let's talk about all those in detail. The first principle to effective communication, clarity, okay? When you talk about clarity, there are 2 things you need to understand about clarity when you're communicating, when you're trying to make your message clear. 2 things. Number 1, there is clarity of thought, and then there is clarity of expression. Now, regarding clarity of thought, the communicator must be clear about what is the objective of communication, what is to be communicated, and which medium will prove to be the most suitable for this purpose. You don't want to start by reversing that. You don't want to start by asking yourself, wait, how am I going to relate this information? I think I'm going to send an email. And then you send it. Now, you first of all have to ask yourself, what exactly am I even communicating? Why? Okay, what is the purpose of this? That should be the first thing. So the first thing should not be, how am I going to relay this information? So that is the thing about clarity of thought. Now, clarity of expression, remember the receiver becomes aware of whatever you are thinking or whatever you want to say based on how you've expressed it. So in order to make our expression perfect, we need to pay attention to a number of things, such as, number 1, use simple words. So you don't have to say demonstrate when you can say show. You don't have to say subsequent to when you can just say after. You don't have to say previous to or prior to when you can say before. The point is simple words, okay? Because you're trying to create understanding. If the purpose of communication is to create confusion, then go ahead, use complex words. Yeah, and then you'll sound like an old dictionary, okay? But simple words tend to work. Number 2, use concrete expressions, the sort of expressions that will make people see. There is a reason why you're told, show them, don't tell them. For instance, look at this sentence. Goods are soon being dispatched. Yeah, we've communicated. Goods are soon being dispatched. Except there are a lot of question marks, okay? When is soon? How soon is soon? How about goods will be dispatched on 2nd April? So in that case, you know when. But look, then again, if you're doing damage control, if you're not certain when the goods are going to be dispatched, but you still want to communicate, then you can use the vague expression, right? But in this case, remember, we are trying to create clarity. Next, prefer active constructions. Active constructions, that is grammar, right? They are the sort of sentences that tell you who did something, not something was done. Here's an example of something that is just not active, rather it's passive, right? Your efforts are appreciated by all of us. Okay, yeah. Now the other version of that sentence will be, all of us appreciate your efforts. And you see this even with blog posts. If you write a blog and you're using something like, there are those plugins that help you to optimize your blog, right? and then they'll tell you your blog is X% passive or X% active. So the point is active construction. We start talking and we know exactly this is the person doing the thing, and so we prefer that. I mean, there are scenarios where you'll get away by, if you use the passive, but for the most part, active kind of works in creating understanding. Both are important. It's just the context in which you're communicating. Are you trying to create understanding instantly, or do you want it to take time? Next, avoid excessive use of the infinitive, basically to plus verb. For instance, it's the duty of the cashier to disburse salaries, or the cashier disburses salaries. It's my job to supervise, or I supervise. So which of those ones do you think kind of makes sense to you? I mean, both of them, all those sentences, they communicate something. But rather than saying it's my job to supervise, I supervise kind of makes you own the situation. Next, avoid jargon. Okay? I mean, yeah, it's your world, and so you want to use those words that make sense in that career. Except to the rest of the people, you're just saying things which aren't clear. And next, avoid ambiguity. Ambiguity just means that, your sentence has more than one meaning. For instance, Jack told John that he was fired. So who exactly was fired? Was it Jack or was it John? See, that sentence is ambiguous. And finally, use short sentences. Why is that? Because the more sentences you write, the higher chances you're going to make a mistake. Or the more you talk, the higher the chance that you're going to become, people are just going to drift. Okay? So that is the thing with clarity, the first principle. Completeness is the second principle of communication. So you really want to ensure that your message is complete. Meaning what? While answering a letter, make sure that you've answered all the questions. And number 2, check for the 5 W's questions. Okay, that is who, what, where, when, and why. Because you don't have as much time as you think you have, and people's attention is sort of limited. Okay, well, it really isn't limited. It's just that people have limited time to pay attention to you. There are other things that are far too distracting or are far too interesting. And so that's pretty much the way it works. It's like if you're watching a video on YouTube, probably watch it after 2 minutes, you're like, nah, need to watch something else. And yet you could just watch the entire Lord of the Rings, and the point is attention is kind of interesting that way, right? Number 3, conciseness. When you're talking about being concise, you're talking about not wasting the time of either your reader or your audience, depending on whatever sort of communication you're using. How do you not waste time? Well, for starters, include only relevant facts in your message. Facts are important, but are they relevant? Okay, here's the thing. The earth goes round the sun. Yeah, except now that doesn't really make sense if you are on a date, right? Hi, I'm X, and by the way, the earth goes around the sun. What does that got to do with anything? I mean, it is a fact. It's just irrelevant in this scenario, right? So that's pretty much the way that works. Next, avoid repetition. Okay? Avoid wordy expression. For instance, in a considerable number of cases. So rather than saying that, just say often. Okay? So you just want to avoid those wordy expression. Again, look, unless somehow you think your status is going to be elevated by using those sort of words, but the point is you're trying to create understanding, you're not trying to create confusion. But it depends on who you are again. Remember, we are trying to make things as simple as possible. Okay? So avoid wordy expression. Organize your message well. That will also help you to be concise. You always have to help the person who's listening to your message. You see, there are 3 things. Okay? There is the logic that goes into how you've organized your message. So that is one. How logic, the arrangement. Okay? Intro, body, conclusion. There is that. But then there is also the degree to which you connect with your audience. And then there is the third one. How do they perceive you? See, the way the audience perceive you has probably nothing to do with, just think of it this way. It's like a brand. And that is the reason why you need to think of yourself as a brand. When you're talking, it's just that you talking. There is also the question of how do they see me? Because if they see you as a credible source, they will believe in what you say. It's the reason why if I ask you which news channel do you watch, you'll probably say this one and I don't watch that one. Why? Because I don't find them to be credible as a source of information. That is the reason why it's important for you to organize your message, because these are things that are going to help make you look like a credible source. Next, consideration. When, for instance, you're writing, you have to be considerate, okay, to your audience or to your readers. Now, and the same goes for when you're talking. The first way to do this is to use or to adopt a you attitude. Rather than saying, I was happy to hear that my letter of January 5th provided you sufficient information, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the other way of saying that with a you attitude would be, thank you for your assurance that you had sufficient information. So what have you just done? You've just taken yourself out of, being the center of attention, and you've put your audience as the center. People like that. I mean, it's something that you can start doing. When you go to a restaurant or any place where those people have name tags, read the name, okay? Just see the name, and then when they start talking to you, tell them, thank you, X, okay? Use their name. And that makes them feel nice. Why? Because you are recognizing their existence. So that is what the you attitude does. And then they'll warm up to you. Next, emphasize positive and pleasant facts. So rather than saying, we regret to inform you that we will not be able to execute your order until... Nope, here's what you can say. Thank you for your order. Goods will be sent to you as soon as... And then you go ahead. Now, either way, they're not receiving their order today, but one message is negative, the other one is positive, and the positive one seems to lift their spirits, and so that is what you want to do. Okay? Number 3, impart integrity to your messages. Remember, it goes back to whether they find you as a credible source or not. And so when they find something, that your message is not just a message, it also comes with integrity. Okay? Then they think, he or she, they are a credible source. And so they, people start to sort of believe in what you say. Now, the other principles of effective communication is courtesy. Meaning what? In business, we must create friendliness with all those to whom we write. And friendliness is inseparable from courtesy. How do you arrive at this? Well, for starters, answer the letters promptly. How prompt is prompt? Well, as soon as you get them. You may not really have a solution to the problem, but you first of all start by saying, I've received the letter. Okay? Thank you for emailing us. And then, you're going to act on your order and blah, 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 right? So you've responded, and then you'll give them the solution when you have it. But at least the first thing you've done is acknowledged that they did something. Okay? Now, number 2, omit irritating expressions. You really don't want to use someone's name with something negative after it. X, you're ignorant. I mean, it's irritating, right? So find a diplomatic way of saying that. And also another way of showing courtesy, apologize sincerely for an omission and thank generously for a favor. You have to understand how the world works. The reason why the successful people tend to be more successful is because they start hanging around a circle of other successful people. And so if they need a favor, they'll just go to that successful person. It's like one of those problems in economics. If you say we are going to sort of create wealth equality by distributing wealth fairly, the problem is that the entrepreneurial types will still do entrepreneurship, and then these other guys will just come and spend their money on these other people's businesses. You give everybody 10,000, and then somebody goes and buy a phone. Where are they buying a phone? To a person who makes a phone. And then they take their 10,000, and now they have 10,000, and this person has a phone, and that person uses that 10,000 to invest in other thing. Meanwhile, you have a phone to take pictures and post on Instagram. See, that's the thing, right? The point is, it's all about favor, and the favor with these people will depend on who they know. And so that is the reason why if you make a mistake in business, apologize. And if it is a favor, be grateful. Now, because it's all about networks, right? Now, the other principle is correctness. Regarding our final principle to communication, or rather effective communication, correctness. So what has this got to do with anything? For starters, give correct facts. Remember we said your facts have to be relevant, but they also have to be correct. Okay? Some things sounds like facts, and then they're not correct, right? So it's like in elementary, basically in primary school. You went through the entire primary school knowing that there are 9 planets. And now, what's happening? It's like, yeah, there are probably 8, there are probably 9 in our solar system. There are other planets. And so it's like, okay, so what is what? All that stuff, right? And the point is, when it comes to communication, just ascertain whatever you've studied, or rather, whatever you're trying to say. Ascertain it to ensure that it's correct, okay, as a fact. Now, next, send your message at the correct time. Remember, time is both psychological and physical, okay? So you probably think, I'll send it in the afternoon. This is the correct time. Except the person's afternoon is booked with meetings, and or they probably just work half day, and you've sent it in the afternoon, and now they're out of the office. And it's one of those person who, once they walk out of the office, they won't do anything relating to work until the next day. And so you thought it was a correct time, except psychologically for them it wasn't. They already checked out. So you need to know your receiver is all I'm saying. Next, send your message in the correct style. So look, all those aspects, okay, all those factors will help you to ensure that your communication is effective. So if there is any question, ensure that you ask. Don't sit there with your question. And well, I'm Moses, and I'll see you in the next video.